Today I'm going to talk about Ghostwatch and Late Night with the Devil, a double bill of horror films that have a similar premise, which is it's a horror show going on live to an audience, and it's meant to be a show that looks into the supernatural and things get out of control. I mean, there's a certain type of movie that does this. It doesn't happen very often, but it sort of started with Ghostwatch, really. Ghostwatch came in the early 90s, actually. And there was a lot of true crime stuff going on in Britain, so they did have to do a horror version of that for Halloween. And, basically they were too successful. Basically, the film was never repeated on BBC after they made it. And the BBC have always been a bit sketchy about it since then, because it's like, that was very controversial. We get in trouble for that. Let's not talk about it again. Now, it wasn't even that was the first version of this idea. It took a lot of influence from the Stone Tape, which is Nigel Neal play from the 70s, which was just about communications devices and how supernatural can go through televisions, and you can have like teams of supernatural investigators trying to investigate it all. That was another creepy one from the 70s that got a lot of attention, but that was Nigel Neal territory. Nigel Neal done Quatermass. He always did these scary things. But by the time the 90s came around, there hadn't been really that many effective horror stuff. Most of the horror in British culture from the 80s was kind of lame, to be honest. Outside of Hellraiser in the 80s and a couple other minor films, there wasn't much in horror. And so the success of this one was a big surprise. Even because the writer of it, Stephen Volk, had written Gothic, which was not well received. He'd written The Guardian, the freaking film, which was not well received. And he'd written The Kiss, which was also not well received. So he'd had a track record of doing films that had not been well received. So like no one had much faith that he was going to write something that was going to be amazing for this one. And I think the BBC probably thought it was going to be a campy thing, because the other films he'd written had been a bit campy. So that was, so I think the expectations were quite low. I don't think they thought it was going to be any good. It was just something silly for Halloween. It's called Ghostwatch, which means it should be dumb as hell, because it sounds dumb as hell. And it's taking this idea of, there's a haunted house, which is this council house. It's not like a old creepy house, just a council house. No one believes it's haunted, but this woman and her two daughters are in the house, and they say something's been on for months, and no one believes them, and they've been called crazy by the local press. And things have gotten so bad, they're willing to allow their house to be broadcast from that night to see if there's any ghosts coming. And there's a national broadcast with people in the studio to talk about hauntings and things. So it's obviously the people making the show and the fictional show expect gimmicks, really. So they're not taking it too seriously. It's just another show on the BBC. And Michael Parkinson is the host. So they actually used presenters who had been in these shows. Like Sarah Green was a well-known TV presenter in the 80s and 90s. You don't see her and stuff as much now, but she was from my generation, she's really well known, because you see her face, you know who it is, because she was in everything. If you're a kid in the 80s, she was in everything. Her husband, Mike Smith, was in the studio as well, so everyone knew at the time everyone knew they were married. Craig Charles from Red Dwarf was the roving reporter, and he did cheesy stuff like that at the time as well. He would go and do little things because he would just take the gig and have some fun with it. I mean, he was well known for, I'll try this. I don't really care if it comes off as cheesy. So everyone was doing stuff they'd done before. You'd seen them in that context, and Michael Parkinson being a host of something was normal because he was a chat show host, and they'd bring him on for certain things here or there, and it was like, yeah, if something's cheesy and BBC aren't taking it too seriously, they'd probably get Michael Parkinson to host it. So everyone was doing jobs that people had seen them do before, which is why some people thought it was real. And by the time it was over, You basically had one of your presenters seemingly disappear and die of a well-known TV presenter. It freaked people out. Even though they put in the beginning, this is a written by Stephen Rourke, this is a TV presentation, and people caught it like 2 minutes in and missed the credits. They'd have thought it was just a normal, it was a TV thing. So it's basically War of the Worlds, the Awesome War of the Worlds done in British TV. And the thing is, it's well put together. It really does come together well. Everyone's well cast in it. The two actors playing the daughters, I think they were sisters, and they were well cast. They could act. The woman playing her mother was a bit standoffish, which is perfect for someone who's traumatised and keeping a distance. You had people in the studio, one was an expert who'd been following the case. You had another one who was a skeptic, the way you'd have in a BBC programme. Everyone looked like they were in place. They were like a typical, slightly qualified but not that qualified people that BBC could afford to hire. And because BBC, their experts were experts they could afford to hire for an hour. They weren't like the world famous experts most of the time. For something like this, it would be something tacky. So everything kind of just looked right, but the actual story's well told because it's following the ideas of a ghost story where you have the setup, something's going on in this house, then you have the development of what's the history of the house, what's the history of these people, you have what's the haunting thing of what could this ghost be, where does it tie back into the history of this house in this area. All that stuff's paid off. It's paid off slowly over this broadcast of going back and forth from the house to the studio, from the house to the studio. Craig Charles walking around the area and not taking it seriously, which is perfect because he's not taking it seriously and he gets these weird, like, scary histories that are really extreme, so he suddenly has to look serious, which is kind of right for that kind of context. Everything's kind of right for the context of what they're doing. And just the thing is, because there's enough skeptics involved in the story, like Michael Parkner plays the host, and he's being skeptical while being the polite host. So there's enough skepticism so that when things start to go crazy and it affects the skeptics, you know things have gone wrong. You know things have just gone to hell. So that's what makes this work, the idea that it's actually explaining stuff and explaining things that people are interested in. People in Britain are interested in ghosts and that idea of the afterlife. We all kind of like it. There's so many ghost stories from Britain. It's just something in the national character that we all kind of like. I mean, there's ghosts in Scotland, England, Wales, Ireland, stories from everywhere. We seem to really like them here. A lot of cultures really like them. It's not just us, but we're one of those cultures that really seem to get into them. We've lots of writers who wrote ghost stories. And Britain does feel like a haunted island at times. So you've got that sense of people being fascinated by this past, and because people in Britain can't spiral stuff out from things they've heard in the past into weird new theories about why this place is haunted. So that this show gets into that, but also gets into the idea of a lot of people just think this is nonsense. You're an idiot for us believing that. But you've also this thing of this family dynamic of this family's falling apart. They're a dysfunctional family. The husbands are gone. There's a room boarded up. There's thumps in the night. Something's going wrong. It's driving these people insane. They can't sleep at night. Someone's getting scratches. The girl's getting scratches. And slowly they hint at what it could be. But the good thing is they never over-explain it. They understand that you give the people enough and let them fill in. You give them A, B, and D and let them fill in C themselves to get to the point, and that allows it to be scary. Well, that's what they do really well. And also the idea of these presenters trapped in the house slowly escalating over time. So to make the last half hour, they can really ratchet it up to things have gone really bad really quickly. And the thing starts to affect even the studio as they basically, because of the cameras involved, have turned this whole thing to a seance. So the infection or the haunting is going through the cameras to create something much worse. And it's a creepy idea, and it's done well because it's not explained totally. It's like, this is what we think's going on, and oh my god, all hell's broken loose. And then they keep it in darkness. They keep the explanation to, we're not going to tell you exactly what happened. You're gonna have to try and figure something out yourself. But it's creepy as hell. That's what they do. They understand ghost things as you don't explain everything, and you also need to have characters you like. Everybody in this is likable. You like most of the people. People are trying to do their best to try and solve this problem. The daughters are sympathetic because they're in a bad situation and they're trying to figure it out. And they're forced into things that is they're forced into circumstances that are driving them insane. The presenters seem decent people. Everyone seems decent, and which ratchets up, because the thing about horror movies is, if you don't like the characters, it's not going to be scary. And the problem with horror movies generally is you don't like the characters. They're always smart ass punks who you want to see die. And this one, you like the characters, so it means when the threat comes, you're actually engaged by the threat. And it just understands all of that it's a slow build, it takes time, it can cut back and forward, which means you can always add more detail, you can go back and recheck certain things, and you can build certain things out. And they can also do cheats. They do cheats in this show where you think you saw something, and then they show you the footage and you haven't seen anything. But in actual fact, because it's not actually alive, it's been recorded ages ago, you did see something, but you never realised. If you rewind back, when they do the rewind back, they'll show you different footage. It's a cheat, but it works. Horror movies do this all the time, and everyone's playing along with it because they want to be scared. So Ghostwatch is terrific. It's really wonderful. It builds to a nice conclusion. It's nasty enough without being too nasty. It's nasty enough to suggest something horrible's happened, but it's not trying to be sadistic. It's just trying to do this as a scary horror story. Now we get to Late Night with the Devil, which is taking that idea back. To me, is not anywhere near as successful as Ghostwatch. And this one is the 70s in America. Sweepspeak, which was a big advertising week for the different shows to see who would get the advertising for the rest of the year. David Dashamel, or I can't pronounce his name fully, he's Polka Dot Man from Suicide Squad, and you've seen him in a million different things. He's a distinctive face. He's never getting good parts because people start to know who he is now. He's a good actor. He's playing the host of this late night show that's actually like, it's not the top show, it's the also ran show. It's the one that's not Carson. It's not this one. It's always second in the ratings or third in the ratings. It's always the one that it promises big things but never quite delivers. So it's just like the show for the people who don't want to watch Carson. It's a B show, really, and he knows it. And his contract's coming up, and there's a chance he's not going to get it because he came out with all this promise, but he never unseated the incumbent. So it's like, you're probably not going to get another contract. Which in this case isn't a big deal. He's going to go back into radio or something. It's not like he's a radio broadcaster before. He'll get other jobs. It's not like he's not going to get another job somewhere. But he's desperate. He wants to beat Carson. He wants to be well known. And it's almost like you make a deal with the devil. If you're that desperate, you might do things you shouldn't do. In this case, it's Halloween show, and he decides to bring on. He starts off with the cheesy spiritualist, who's obviously a fraud, but very 70s spiritualist, and he's also got a skeptic who's debunking everything, and he's just bringing this show and trying to look like he's an impartial observer. He's like, I'm just showing you this stuff, make up your own mind. But obviously he's in it to try and get ratings, so he's lying his head off. But he's just a guy in a job trying to keep his job. It doesn't feel like he's that bad. It just feels like somebody's desperate. But then he brings on this girl that says possessed, and I mean, this thing's promised from the start of the film. What the film does is, we're going to see the broadcast, this infamous broadcast that no one's ever seen since it was broadcast. And we've also got these shots of what happened during the commercial breaks. Because America has lots of commercial breaks, so they use that to have these black and white images, black and white recorded conversations. What was going on between each, when they went for break, and as they were talking during that time, you see the escalation of desperation of things you wouldn't see on screen, but you see it here from the footage. And slowly the story gets out of control. It's a slow build up. The first half hour is basically setting up everything. The lead character, the host, what his background is. His failures, the fact his wife has died about a year ago. He's emotionally frayed around the edges about that, and which he won't admit, but he is. He's very ambitious. He has a past with some organisation that's supposedly very satanic, but this is the 70s and everyone was in a club for something weird. So he's got a past, he's got a weird situation going on there, but it's a bit of build up to what's going to go on here, which is when he brings out this girl who they promised from the start, and then slowly as the spiritualist is more or less suggested to be a bit of a faker, and he's interacting with a skeptic, the host says he has to bring on the big guns, bring on this girl who's meant to be possessed. And from then on in, the film gets a bit more out of control and a bit more obviously horror, less story about the 70s era. But it is about human desperation. The big problem with this film I found was its structure meant that you had to wait a long time to go through scenes that were technically accurate to the times and things, but weren't that interesting. Like, everyone knows that the spiritual thing in the 70s was lots of like fakers. We all know how they do the fakery, and the first half hour is exposing that, and it's like, where do you know all that stuff? Anyone who knows anything of this knows that stuff. And then it sort of builds to the horror of this possessed girl, and everyone's seen possessed girls before, and this is done well, but it's still basically the Exorcist on TV type of thing. There's nothing there that's inherently new. So the film can only go so far, and then when it goes full into horror, it's fun to watch. It's undeniably fun to watch, but it doesn't feel like it's groundbreaking. It just feels like I've watched something that was an hour and a half long, which could have been 50 minutes, and probably been more effective. This is basically a film that should have been like a Halloween special type of thing. It's too long, and the finale is kind of obvious, and you don't particularly like or dislike any of the characters. Oh, they're quite interesting, but they're not really interesting. So you basically have an hour and a half film that feels a bit long, even an hour and a half, and there's a gimmick that's well done, but there's not actually that much meat in the bone. Well, with Ghostwatch, they built it up, and they'd actually had enough material so that the gimmicks didn't come through as a gimmick. The gimmick just felt like they packaged the material for the whole story, but there was enough of the actual story to keep you going for that hour and a half. There was always something more interesting going on. This one doesn't do that. This one is much more, yeah, we've only got like 2 ideas here, really, and they're not new. But it's going to be fun to watch these characters. But the characters are not fascinating in themselves. They're interesting enough, and they're well acted, but the writing kind of lets it down. It just feels like it could have been off the rails a little bit sooner, and then following the logic of desperation off the rails to make it much more like Dog Day Afternoon, of this thing that's getting way out of control and no one stopping it, rather than it get out of control at the end, but you did an hour and 20 minutes of things that were kind of predictable, things that were creepy only in a way if you hadn't seen a horror movie for a while. Creepy. It's like there's nothing there that's really fascinating. It's well done, but it's just okay. It's not anything unusual. So I'd say if you're going to go for this kind of movie, Ghostwatch all the way. Ghostwatch is really good. Late Night with the Devil, well made, but it falls apart in the writing, really, because the writing just is not interesting enough. Like, it's too long, and there's not enough meat in the bone, basically. So I hope you enjoyed this video. They're both films worth seeing, but if you've got a choice, watch Ghostwatch. Okay, that's me for now. Bye.